Good evening and welcome to Nerdsatnite. This is Kid Thunder DJ, joined as always by
Fire 47.
All right, so a loaded show for you tonight. First, let's get some simple plugs out of the way. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/nerdsatnite, N-I-T-E. Twitter at Nerdsatnite, N-I-T-E. YouTube if you search for Nerdsatnite as well, which we have scheduled 3 videos coming up over the next 3 weeks, as well as one that just dropped this last Tuesday. So check those out. Leave us some feedback. Let us know what you think. And also leave us suggestions for games you want to see us play, especially any games we can go head-to-head at and embarrass ourselves greatly like we just did with Mario Kart.
Yeah, that was fun.
It was. Well, except for the losing terribly. So, just also want to let you guys know in the next 2 weeks, on the weekend of March 12th, excuse me, at the Machinist Building in Bridgeton, Missouri. That's right off 270 and on St. Charles Rock Road for you guys that are in the area. Is the next Toy Man Toy Show. Ourselves, Catman Games, Toys of Our Youth, and a lot of other vendors will be out there. A lot of good stuff this show. I know we try to say that. I know it's our job to say that. But we've got character backpacks for Spider-Man and Star Wars. Some classic Jack-specific WWE Legends figures, including Captain Lou Albano, the Wild Samoans, Too Cool, Rikishi. A lot of semi-modern and definitely retro stars. Some other cool stuff. Gaming-wise, we're bringing a couple new Genesis items. I'm going to have a power base converter there, a copy of Double Dragon, which is a hard one to find for Genesis. A lot of other good games.
I think you found this really cool, like NES-style book.
Oh well, that already got sold. We ended up with a copy of the Playing with Power NES hardback edition, which is like a super history of like 17 games and a guide. But yeah, that made it to online and then got claimed horribly, which, wow. Talking retro games, we'll get into a topic later on about that. So let's kind of start things off. Let's review a few games we've played recently. I'll start. One I've played recently is Yakuza 0, which, if you're familiar with the Yakuza games, it's a lot of the same. There's a lot of cutscenes. There's a lot of dialogue, not in English. Yeah. But if you are like me and you don't care and you can skip all that stuff and still enjoy a game for just gameplay, it's a pretty fun game. You have to switch between your 3 fighting styles you eventually learn to make sure you're using the right style for the right situation. Enemies get progressively harder as it goes on. The story that I read is pretty good. It's not quite good enough that I care enough to really read every cutscene and every subtitle. But I certainly sort of get the gist of it, so I know what's going on.
Yeah, especially when like the Yakuza series always has those varying cutscene styles. Like some of them will be fully animated, fully voiced. Some of it will be just plain,
almost like motion comic
character sprites and text.
Right, motion comic style, basically, where it's very limited movement. I mean, it varies in importance, obviously. So, right, the ones that don't have the bigger cutscenes obviously aren't as important, but still. It does get kind of jarring. Yes, and it is a pretty good game. It is definitely worth the check out if you're into the series. I'm enjoying it.
Especially if you like games that are just chock full of just side content and just things to do. Like, not even things you have to do or collect or whatever. Just things you can just go out and do for the fun of it. Right. There are all sorts of like different little mini games. There's like arcade shops based on Sega and their properties.
Yeah. You can go into the arcade. You can play Afterburner. You can play a couple of the racing games. If you've seen a Yakuza game,
it's a Yakuza game.
You can do claw machines that have authentic Sega toys. It's pretty fun. Definitely a lot of fanboy service if you're an old Sega fan like me. Yep. So let's move on. You've been getting more and more into this Neo game. What's it all about?
Well, so far the story is kind of hard to follow. It usually is for a Souls-type game. It's probably something that's going to make more sense when I finish it and maybe even replay it. But essentially, you're this Englishman who is going to Japan to collect this essentially like this material that makes people stronger, more or less, called Imrita. And it's like very rich in that land. And those are essentially the souls and whatnot that you would collect, like in the Soul series, that enemies drop there. So that's kind of like the mainish thing, but, there's subplots and whatnot that are being built that I'm not too far into, but as far as the gameplay and whatnot goes, it's Dark Souls, but more.
Cool. Definitely sounds like it's worth checking out. And then finally, I jumped into Berserk Clan of the Hawk or whatever it is. Or Band of the Hawk.
Band of the Hawk.
Yeah, it's
another Warriors game.
Yeah, it's a Warriors game, so it's a lot of hack and slash. It's a lot of just sort of button mashing until you kill enough things. So in that regard, it's nothing too special. But if you were a fan of sort of the Berserk and, you know, that it's based on, and if you really like those characters, because you do get to sort of play as those characters, plus you can unlock certain bosses and play them through a kind of free play mode. What was the big guy I was fighting?
Zod.
Yeah, I was able to do that with Zod. It was pretty fun. So it has its moments. It's certainly more interesting than some of the more recent Warriors games, but it's not.
I mean, this is my own personal complaint just with the series in general. I never liked just how stupid the cannon fodder enemies are. Just they do not do anything against you.
Right, they
literally just stand there, hold their weapons up, and they will never swing. They'll never do anything, and the only real threats are ever the bosses.
Right.
And I get that's kind of the whole point of the series, but I want...
You want more. You want
to feel like
the fight...
like the fight's real. Well, they're not just standing there.
Let's take it back to Yakuza for a second. In the Yakuza, you know, you get jumped by 3 guys in the alley. They are on you, and you can almost, you know, get to a point where you can barely get up, and you're getting railed again.
Yeah.
You know, in these kind of games, I just charge up. I'll literally stand in front of a more or less sub-boss and charge up for the hard hit, and they just stand there staring at me blankly.
Right.
And it does get a little bit better as the game wears on. You know, I'm a good couple levels in.
I mean, I imagine it does change, and this was just a couple early levels, but
if you want mindless fun, and you were a fan of the series, it's worth it. They use a lot of cutscenes lifted straight from the movies and stuff.
Yeah, the animated movies they did.
It's definitely worth playing if you're a fan of the series. If you're not a fan of the series and you weren't a fan of the Warriors games, this is going to pass you by.
Right, it's going to hurt. But I mean, I think if you are a fan of the Warriors series but don't know a lot about Berserk, it could be a good entry point because it does cover a lot.
Yeah, it is good for if you want to learn. But I mean, all in all, like I said, it really comes down to your preference about the series. If you're either curious about it or were a fan, it's great. If you aren't or are not curious, don't. But enough on that. So, I understand there's going to be some Zelda Breath of the Wild DLC.
Yeah, it was a little bit of old news, but it kind of just pivots into some of our points we're going to discuss. But it was announced that they're getting a season pass for a set of DLC that's going to be trickled out through the coming year. For $20, you'll get, for just what you're going to get at the start of the game is a couple chests in the starting area on day one that'll get you some helpful items. And I think it's some sort of like clothing item for Link that's essentially just advertisement for the new console. So it's like more of gimmick, or it's like joke clothes than anything real.
Yeah.
And, you know, later on in the summer, you'll get a trial cave, hard mode, and as they put it, an additional map feature. I don't know if that means a new area or not, but
probably.
And then later on in winter, you'll get some sort of new original story, a new dungeon, and more challenges. So the whole thing about this that's kind of weird, or not weird, is just in the industry as a whole is the idea of these behind these season passes that basically don't get you a lot at the start, and you just got to wait for them to put it out.
Which I always felt if we were going to have a model where we were paying to have more content, this is why DLC for games like Final Fantasy or Skyrim or Fallout usually don't bother me.
Yeah.
Or oddly enough, like the Lego games, because usually they're all full enough on their own, they're worth the money invested, and this does feel like extra. And I like the fact that they don't front street all of it. That you get some kind of goofy stuff up front, stuff that just more or less gets you into the game and having a little bit of fun. And then, you know, when they know you're hitting that end content level, that's when they start sort of dicing out more. And I
mean, a lot of it, I'm sure, is also development time, too.
Right.
They need to finish it. Because, I mean, like,
a lot of this is ready. Don't get me wrong. A lot of this is ready.
Yeah, it is a bit on both ends. But, you know, I mean, we were having the similar issue with Final Fantasy 15, where you got that game and you got its season pass and I don't think you've gotten anything out of it yet.
No, other than the bonus holiday stuff. No.
Yeah, there was that in that like Chocobo Carnival.
And that one silly mini game.
Yeah, that Chocobo thing.
No.
Oh no, you mean
the separate downloadable application.
Yeah, the little hack and slash game.
Yes.
That was actually kind of neat. But
was, but yeah, you're right. I haven't gotten anything yet. And you compare that to games like WWE 2K17 where they were kicking out DLC every month, just about.
Yeah.
So, which is fine. That's good too because those games burn through a little bit faster. So you need that fresh content to keep it interesting. Especially if you're a character creator like I am and you like to see what new parts you can incorporate, what new moves, whatever. So
yeah, that's right up your alley.
It is. So it definitely looks interesting. It looks like it's Nintendo's attempt at really sort of folding themselves back into the fabric of gaming because they tried to go the Apple road of putting their players in a sort of very specific corner of the gaming industry and trying to keep themselves as separate as they could.
It hasn't really worked.
And it didn't. It worked for them before. It worked with the GameCube.
The following ad is being condensed for your viewing convenience.
Sorry about that.
So I just switched to
that noise off. Sorry, we were getting ready for the next segment here, and
ads suddenly start flowing.
Right, ads start flowing, so I had to mute that. But no, let me finish this thought though, and that is Nintendo is trying so hard to stay relevant that they're going to start copying notions that the other gamer companies are doing, which is fine. There's some of them they need to copy. My hope is that they stay true enough to form, which they kind of are just by what the Switch is. But I'm worried if the Switch still doesn't do as well as they want, the next console they put out is going to be a straight bore console. And whether you agreed with it or not, their last two consoles had innovations. And had innovations that were positive impacts on games.
Yeah.
So I really hate to see them lose it all in favor of profit, but,
We'll see how things go. I mean, so far, because of the way they've lined the Switch up, having, this huge new Zelda game that's changing so many levels and everything, or things up, they're getting, like, it may be meant to you, but it is definitely getting hype.
It is getting
and
hype.
It's getting
they are
them,
doing that right.
They're definitely going to have a good launch.
Hopefully.
At the very least with the main system.
I say May because this is still a system, or still a Zelda game they've been working on for years, and it's approaching that Duke Nukem Forever level of how many times are you going to retool this thing to work with new hardware and how much is going to get left behind because of it. But we'll see. I have high hopes. I actually have real ironical hope that this goes well.
Yeah.
It'll make our buddy Charles over at Catman Games happy because he's all in on Nintendo, so we'll see how that goes. But anyway, moving on. So, going back to the games we reviewed, Finding Neo was a bitch.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and this has been a thing, and actually, speaking of Nintendo, this was a thing they like to do a lot, because this was the same problem we ran into with the first, or not the first, but the
first 3DS Fire Emblem.
Yeah, the first game. 3DS
Fire Emblem Awakening.
Right. Where they make these games, and then they purposely give them a limited production run, so that, like, I think the GameStop that we normally do business with said they got 5 copies in of Neo.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, and I mean, even though we already had the game, ordered and coming, we were still just kind of just looking around at other, Walmarts and other
anywhere
game
that
centers.
sold games.
Right, and all of them I would find just empty spot numbers for it.
Right.
Here's the case where it's supposed to be. It ain't in there.
Right. And, we always wonder, is this sort of the game manufacturer's final revenge against stores like GameStop to just go all digital? And what does that really mean for the future? Is it a detriment? Is it a boost? Could you preload these games to get rid of the whole concept of midnight releases? My whole thought is this. It's a detriment because there are still people who love collecting the media. They like that shelf with all of their nice lined up games and here's the Steelbox version, and they'll put on the shelf, here's the big chainsaw version of Resident Evil 4 I got for GameCube. Here's, the Ultra Box for Skyrim, and it's like, okay. And I don't think that's ever going to go away because there's too much money in it. Some paper printed special crap they can slap in a pretty cardboard box that costs them nothing to make and charge you an additional $50 for.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd be a fool to get rid of that. So
yeah, I mean, special editions and whatnot are always going to be around.
But I do think they're going to try their best, especially for and it's going to start with niche games. It's going to start for games that they know will make their money back, but probably aren't going to be huge sellers.
Yeah.
As long as there's going to be these big epic games that need the data that's on the disc, it's not going to go away fully either because of those. But yeah, you're going to see more and more any little games they can push out as download only. I think is going to be the way they go.
Right, and I mean, as far as like detrimental or positive or not, it kind of depends on your viewing angle because, yeah, for the producer, they're cutting out production costs, but when you get things like if a system goes down or they stop getting support, you're basically only buying the right to play it.
Right, and that's the other big thing that makes it a detriment is there are a lot of download titles that get rolled off these online stores all the time, especially if it's a licensed IP. For example, a few years back or a year or two back, Steam had to delist a ton of Marvel games because they were all made by Activision, and then Activision lost the Marvel rights. And that was it. Deadpool and all the others got pulled off for a while until they resorted the rights. So it's you have to be very careful, I should say, because when you go download only, you're really setting yourself up for some potential headaches there.
Yeah.
And it was just a thought to throw out there. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments for this episode. Leave us a Facebook comment. I like, if you like getting games only digitally, some people do. Then let us know. If you hate getting digital, if you hate the problems that go along with it and the clogging up your hard drive, let us know that as well. Keep the conversation going.
I'd say I'm kind of middle ground in the end.
All right. And speaking of game advertisements, I was looking around online a couple days ago, and I get a little bored at work when I have nothing better to do. And it's so weird. We hate them when they're interrupting our favorite show, but how many of you out there kind of go back and, oh, hey, remember, commercials from the 90s or the 80s? And and then we go back and we find like an hour-long playlist of commercials, the things we used to dread and avoid. Because then it's always funny because it's always a really interesting snapshot of whatever year you picked. That's the everyday person life. You know what I mean? That's what every kid was supposed to look like. Every adult was supposed to look like. America at its, shiny and happiest is whatever year you looks at. It's commercials.
Yeah.
And I say this because gaming's no different. Their commercials are always very indicative of the times. And now you've got these... I mean, nowadays, it's movies and video games are basically one and the same in terms of how they're produced and marketed. So you get these epic trailers with some kind of licensed song like the Gears of War, 3 or 4 trailer where they used
4.
Into Dust.
Yeah, you've been all over that song for a minute now.
Huh?
You were all over that song for a little while.
No, not the Into Dust. I was into the one that was the cover of...
oh, yeah, the cover.
Of Nothing Else Matters.
Yeah.
But it's still that idea that it's these... it's a movie trailer. And it's not the same as it was back in the day. So I was like, what... For one of our retro topics this week, we get 2 this week because they're both short. What were your favorite retro game commercials? And you actually picked a couple of nice ones. We'll get to yours in a minute. But I want to start with mine just because I'm the host of the show, so deal with it. Do you love my halcyon sort of ways of dealing with things? I'll just do this.
Yeah.
All right, so first we're going to start with...
In the ring, out of the ring, out of control!
If you can hear it.
Royal Rumble on Super Radio 16 Meg This crowd's rocking! It's perfect. With more WWE
Superstars right there. So,
unbelievable 6 minutes.
what we're talking about with this one, and hopefully you guys can still hear me over this, is these were the old wrestling game commercials. They were all like this for this era. And if you could find this commercial and look at it, it's all these smash cuts of the wrestlers doing their real moves in real life. And then superimposed, every now and then everything stops, all the music, all the announcer, and then it'd be the one wrestler they wanted to feature who was really in it, saying some little phrase for a second, and then he's out, and then it's more smash cuts of game footage and people doing the moves for real. And that was how any of these games, and toys really for that matter, were in that era. It's, we'll show you all the bright, fast-paced action of reality, and then, here's the game. Don't notice that it runs like crap comparison to real life.
16 megs.
Yeah, 16 megs. So that was the first one, and of course you knew one of mine was going to have something to do with wrestling.
So what we got for the next one?
Well, let's see, shall we?
Mario!
So this was a very simple and kind of cool for the era commercial. It's all these kids in different colored clothes, but each group in the same color, standing, and they're all shouting Mario, and the camera keeps panning out more and more, and eventually it's this whole notion that they're all standing.
Super Mario 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
There's power in numbers.
Yes, they're all standing in
Nintendo,
the shape of Mario. I just like that. Super Mario 1, 2, 3. Super serious Asian voice. Even though it was an American commercial. So yeah, that was a really cool commercial because it was, it was just cool that it was one of those first times I can remember. I'm sure I saw it 1,000 times before. A transition from reality to computer generated that looked vaguely real. Back then it was real noticeable when they were trying to go computer.
Yeah.
So it was cool to see something that vaguely looked like it belonged in reality.
I mean, I could still, I'm kind of looking at it from over here, or I was watching it. I could see something like that being done in this day and era.
Oh, yeah, and they could do it even better now. They can make it look even more detailed.
I mean, or I guess I should say the way that one looks could pass.
Well, yeah, and there's some commercials from the 90s they still play today. I mean, that commercial of that they play at Christmas time of all the Hershey's Kisses playing Carol, or We Wish You a Merry Christmas as if they were bells. That commercial was made when I was, a younger man. So it's like, it's been out for years and they redo it. Same with the M&M's asking if Santa really exists, and then they see each other and faint. So it's like, if done right, a commercial, even a computer generated one, can be sort of timeless.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into my third one here. See if you guys recognize it.
Now, when you buy the Sega Genesis that comes with Sonic 1, you'll get Sonic 2 absolutely free. Sonic 2 handles stubborn stains, embarrassing bald
So if you
spots,
can't
no
hear
problem.
it's basically the Sonic 2 included with Sonic 1 box set commercial for the Model 1 Sega. And what made it so cool is they were ripping off all of the daytime TV, not really infomercials, but daytime TV quick product commercials, where it's like, oh, the Ginsu knives where it'll slice, chice, and dop, and do potato, blah, blah, blah. Or, and they were kind of smash cutting a bunch of them in together, where it was like,
they're basically using the cartridge or the box for the game as the product.
Right, like it would cover a bald spot and it was just, glued to the back of some guy's head and chopping vegetables and everything else. So
it was really funny.
It was a great commercial for its era because it really, again, kind of captured that 90s culture of daytime TV selling you whatever they could sell you. So let's get over here to Jerko's commercials. Now, he picked some good ones, although I have a question about your first one once we get it to play. So, hang on. Here we go.
The hell?
Spyro is back. He's every dragon's hero. He flies, he climbs, he swims.
Spyro the Dragon 2.
And he breathes fire everywhere. Oh, sure, everyone loves Spyro. Don't let that innocent little purple dragon fool you. He's one dragon you don't want to mess with. I did, and look what happened to me!
So the whole theme of this commercial was the snowman is talking about how Spyro is really kind of evil. Was there snowmen in Spyro 2? I don't remember there being snowmen in there.
I think there might have been, but it was more or less because he breathes fire, I think, and obviously...
Well, no, because he wasn't melted. It was more because that was when... Remember, one of his main things is you could sort of just go into that sort of downward run and charge into things. And
that was the cool thing that all three of the original Spyro commercials kind of had, was it was always kind of based around...
Spyro being a dick?
In a weird way, yeah. It was kind of fitting for the 90s era.
It was, because
90s
he was supposed to have that... He was supposed to have that, he was supposed to be cute, but supposed to also have that edgy attitude.
Yeah, because it was like in the first one, if you go back and watch that, it has a sheep talking about like, oh, everyone loves Spyro, but then it cuts to this sheep puppet animatronic thing that all 90s cartoons or commercials had, and he's got partially charred fur or wool and whatnot, because for the Spyro series, Spyro would always attack sheep to get his health back.
Right, he could eat them. That's the...
Well, they would turn into
into
butterflies that Sparks would then eat, which is, that's a thing somehow.
It was eating without, going all Jurassic Park.
Right. Or just lighting on fire, because that's always a good time.
All right, let's see what your second one is here.
This one should be famous.
So for those of you who don't know, this is the classic N64 commercial for the original Smash Brothers, where there's just basically people dressed as these characters in full-body foam costumes, beating the hell out of each other. Yes.
In one 4-player star-studded slam fest only on Nintendo
It's always
64.
interesting, like going back and looking at '90s commercial styles, because like I was saying, because that was kind of the general vibe they would always have, is having these characters as like mascots, like literal mascots.
Well, they were, and that's.
I mean, in literal mascot outfits.
Yes,
because you also
in big costumes walking around, fighting each other. And very little gameplay footage, and that's the one sort of runabout theme to all these. I mean, Spyro had the most gameplay footage.
Spyro was definitely like introducing some of the new abilities he had from the old that he didn't have from the old game.
But the rest showed as little gameplay as they could in favor of whatever gimmick they were trying to do, because gaming was so limited back then. You don't want to watch that shit for too long; it would look like crap.
But yeah, but like you also, like, to add on to the bit, like you go back and look at like all the old Crash Bandicoot commercials, like where he's like getting the megaphone and like yelling at Nintendo.
Yes, and he
Studios.
Was also
in a mascot
suit. Still a guy in a mascot suit. Yes, which was really
and
cool. So let's play your final commercial now. This one, I'll give you guys a heads up.
It's a little bit less of a commercial.
Yeah, you found it looking...
excuse me. I found it the other day, actually, before I was looking for this. And I thought it was just kind of funny, because it was basically a crossover ad between Tekken 3 and this milk commercial.
Yep. So, to describe it, while you guys listen to it, is...
It opens on a normal Tekken match.
Right. You see Law beat up Paul.
If it loads.
Yeah.
Like, straight up normal gameplay.
Right. Well, it's definitely Tekken 3.
Cuts the next guy, there's like a character.
And they make a cow called Lovely.
Suddenly, Law's fighting a cow.
And of course, he can't hit the cow. Cow just keeps walking away. And now it's hitting him.
Knocks him up and then beats the shit out of him.
Yeah, it starts doing volley attacks.
And like kicks its legs. And it was just like a weird little milk ad. And I just thought weird, funny, and just kind of fit for the era still.
It did. So, good choices. Now, let's get out of that sort of a topic, because it's boring. This is boring. Let me get back into my notes here. So, speaking of obsolete commercials, obsolete technology. We've all bought something that went obsolete almost immediately. I'm going to go over a couple of my favorite ones. For me, literally the day after I bought my Aegea physics card, they were announced that they were being bought by NVIDIA. Which, I'm like, okay, that sucks. This is going to be the only physics card that they do as their own. But it's going to be a while before they're able to... And then I further read the press release. It's like, next generation of cards, which were due out in like 3 months, are all going to be physics enabled right off the bat. So literally I was already obsolete because the company wasn't going to exist anymore the day after I bought the product.
Yeah.
And then it's not even like, well, it'll be in support for a while until they incorporate this technology, because, you know, from probably some sort of backdoor deal where NVIDIA had a hand in it from the start, they already were pretty much ready to go. They just had to slap the coprocessor on there for the physics and they were done. So it's like, well, that's a waste of $150. And I bought it for one game that I knew would support it, which was City of Heroes, which, to be fair, your powers looked a lot cooler if you had a physics card, because they could start doing particle physics really early on, and it made a lot of them look really cool and unique versus, all of the cloud-based ones kind of look like a cloud, all the fire ones all look like the same fire. They could really sort of go through and make them better. Another one along the same lines of computer stuff, most of mine are computer stuff, was the ATI All-in-Wonder cards, which were a combination of their graphics card and TV tuner.
So yeah, you could basically watch something through your computer?
Right.
Yeah, remember
and this is like real ZTV, so this was before streaming. This is...
I was going to say, I think my dad didn't Dad had one of those, right?
Mom and Dad had them. They loved them, even after they went obsolete, because not long after... And this one I got a little more life out of, but about 6 months later, they started changing the style, USB 2.0 had really taken hold. So they started making USB-based ones. And digital TV started. And then once digital TV started and they could go digital to a USB off air, and it was just, sooner or later the All-in-Wonders just got their back ends handed to them, and now I don't even think they make them anymore. But just another thing. And then the last thing, and again, worst luck, is I bought a netbook because I didn't want a full-size laptop, and at the time the few tablets that existed were just not great for end use. And then sure enough, the iPad, which had been out for not too long, was going to get its first price drop, and everywhere started dumping netbooks by the truckloads. The same netbook I paid $300 for, 1 week, less than a month later, was down to $150 to get clearanced out. And then I think eventually they were just being sold down by like $50.
Dang.
Yeah. So what about you? What did you buy that was worthless? Really quick.
Nothing much immediately comes to mind on this, honestly. I guess the only thing I could think of is me and Dad had the PS1 when we finally did get that. The PS2 was out not long after that. And we couldn't. And then I think we ended up getting that Wizardry game that me and him played the hell out of, but we couldn't play it for a while because we didn't actually have the console.
Right. I do think it was funny you got your first Nintendo Wii after they were pretty much on their way out.
Yeah, that's true.
And then also, this was kind of both of us. Remember when I bought a PSP, and then they're like, "Oh, but the next version's coming out soon."
Oh yeah, the Go.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was. Yeah, the PSP just never, or no, the Vita. The PSP never really.
Yeah, no versions of Sony's handheld have really ever done well. They've done enough to justify.
I don't even know if I'd say done well. That's another matter. I just mean has been something that's lasted long in this house, which kind of sucks because there are a couple things I want to go back and play, the Dissidia games I've always kind of upset I've missed out on, but I just never feel like there's enough to justify it,
There isn't, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
So, those are some of the interesting things that have gone obsolete on me. And I say this because we're getting near time when, some new stuff's going to be introduced and ready to go. I mean, we're just past Christmas, so next big hurdle's back to school, which is funny because we're not even out of the school year yet. It was just a fun thing to think about, but let's move on. Kind of our final topic tonight. It's going to be a little bit of a short show, probably. We got through some of these topics faster than I was expecting, but let's talk some wrestling. WrestleMania is coming up. We kind of already know where everything's going. AJ Styles versus Shane McMahon, John Cena and whichever one of the Bellas he's banging versus The Miz and Maurice. You got Randy Orton, in spite of what they're doing on the show, is going to be going against Bray Wyatt for the belt. So, you got a lot of good stuff going on there. But the one thing I've noticed, and it's not hard to figure out why, but is the marketing blitz for Mania, the road to WrestleMania, as it were, just seems so flat the last few years.
Yeah.
And it can all be traced back to a couple of big problems. And one is, they're so desperate to have quote-unquote big match feels that we know where we're going way too soon in the road to WrestleMania. You can argue in the past, well, we always know where we're going from the Royal Rumble, which is true. We always know what the main event's going to be, or at least most of the time always know, from the Royal Rumble, when that's fine. That's the draw. You set that hook to get everybody interested, or that's the lure on the hook to get everybody interested. The hook to get people to go, okay, I'll slap my money down and get this show, is what else do you add to that? What's the undercard to build to this? Now, there's a couple things that have changed in the world that are not helping the problem. Going back to a brand split, so you've got two main events every time to contend with. The fact that instead of buying one large pay-per-view investment, you're now paying every month for the network. So it's like, do I watch it now? Do I wait and just sort of pick through it when it's not live anymore? So the sense of urgency's gone just because access has been easier.
Yeah.
But there's also the predictability. We kind of already, we know most of the card now. We know, who, unless somebody gets injured, like this whole Naomi situation, we know the reasons why for stuff. We know roughly what's going to happen already. And, that's very hard to build casual interest when, you Google WrestleMania and instead of, oh, here's the card for WrestleMania, it's, here's why they're going to book so-and-so to beat so-and-so. Come to our blog about Wrestling Insider Info and learn why this year's WrestleMania is already in the books. And it's like, if you're a casual fan, what you can figure it all out from the smart marks and then it's over. So it's our fault, guys. That's at the end of this. But there's also been this lack of true big match feels, and especially since Taker lost to Lesnar, because that was always their guarantee. Undertaker's match was always going to be a big feel match, even when we knew what was going to happen, and that's not really there anymore. And that's going to hurt them for a while until they find that yearly thing to fill the void. The Andre the Giant Battle Royal was not that thing. So I talk about all this, and the idea is, well, what do we do to fix it? If the problem is it's too predictable, if there's a difficulty getting time investment in, especially all at once when your access allows you to view it at a later date or view it in sections, in a very weird way, it hurts more that there isn't as big of a money investment up front because, if you're only got to pay $10 a month to see it, and then you're not as urgent. The sense of urgency is not there. If it's, I have to pay $50 this month at this time to see this show, or for a couple days after the replay, that sense of urgency is bigger. It
that makes sense.
It can make a smaller Mania feel bigger because you're still a fan and you still want to see it.
Because it's almost like you're pre-ordering it, and then you kind of you don't have to worry about it. You're not thinking about it, and then it sneaks up on you, and you're not building up that hype,
Well, it's more the other way. It's you're letting yourself get hyped because you've made that investment monetarily. If I said Skyrim was going to be $10 for you when it came out, you wouldn't be as excited about it as you would if you had to plop down $60, because in a lot of ways you have to get your hopes up because you spent a lot of money on this thing.
Yeah.
And, when a pay-per-view like Mania used to be $60... Well,
that's what I was kind of referring to when I was saying the pre-order as far
I get you. Okay.
When you're going through the WWE Network and just you can watch it.
Right.
Just by having the service.
But going back to the
back
notion...
in the day when you're putting down all that money and you got to save it up and you can only pay for it, then it's like you got to hold on to this money because I got this thing I'm waiting to watch.
Right. There is that concept of a destination event versus a common event.
But once you have, for when you're on the network now, when you're just continually putting down the same amount of cash, and
you get
there are things you get everything, and there are things you're not directly watching. Even some things you could skip out on. This thing kind of just more or less just comes up on you, and you're not that.
Yeah, it's just
you're not thinking about it.
It's just another line item.
Yeah.
So, what they can do to fix it is a kind of a leery question because it's like it almost seems counterproductive to be like, well, you don't promote everything. You don't. And you don't have to. Or if you promote it, you don't advertise directly, hey, we're going to do person A versus person B. You say, here's your big key ones. You maybe do your two main events, as long as you have a brand split, there's going to be two main events, a sub-main event for each one, and then you go, and more. And you let these angles build on TV, and maybe even do a few red herring angles where you think, oh my God, these guys are definitely going to go at Mania, and then they don't, or they go on the pre-show or something like that, and you go, wait, what? And, you're more invested because that you're making up for that loss of
revenue?
Of self-hyping that comes with spending money. You spend more money, you're more interested in something because you've made that monetary investment. Without that monetary investment, it's very easy to get meh about a situation, and that's what's happening. And they've got to figure out a way to get that spark back, and I think that's one of the ways to do it. Another way is to protect themselves more. Maybe throw out 3 scenarios out there that float around. Yes, all 3 are still going to get out, but it's still, if you check the dirt sheet sites and it's like, oh, that's going to be this, or this. Well, which one is it? Well, we don't know for sure. It's going to be a game day decision. Well, then I got to watch it that day to know which one it's going to be.
Yeah.
I can give you 500 scenarios, and even if one of them's true, you're not going to know which one it is. So there's that whole notion of, you can get that sense of urgency back because you just don't know what's going to happen. So that's, my thoughts on Mania. And I know we're not talking a lot about what's going on. I mean, I've talked about a couple of the quote-unquote highlight matches, especially from the SmackDown side. I'll be honest, Raw bores the hell out of me still. It's 3 hours and they still haven't figured out what they're doing. SmackDown is a overall better show. That doesn't mean it's always better. In fact, if you check out Wrestling with Regrets page, they do a Who Wore It Better to see who had the better week. And there are times Raw has the better overall show. But again, when it's 3 hour investment of time, and I know 20 minutes of that's going to be a heel promo by whoever's in charge, it's just so grating I can't do it.
That makes sense.
So, some other interesting news is they're not sure the match between Shaq and Big Show is going to happen at Mania, which I'm kind of okay with.
Shaq is in, like, Shaquille?
Yeah.
And
he was going to have a match with Big Show, and they had been, trying to get him trained and everything to make it at least somewhat decent, but the Big Show was doing an interview where, he's talking about Shaq not getting into shape and time running out and him being like, look, if you don't want to do this, let's not. Could all be hyped, though. So,
I mean, sounds like I said, I hadn't heard of this before, but I mean, sounds like it could be interesting. But then again, there are a lot of these like celebrity
involvements in
Mania. Yeah, and in most cases, from what I've seen from like you watching Mall Culture, videos and your usual like wrestling videos, like overhearing it, celebrity things usually don't turn out that well.
Well, yes and no. You can do celebrity and you can do it right, like Mr. T in the first WrestleMania, he had 5 other wrestlers protecting him to make him look good. They wouldn't let him do anything that wasn't basically amateur-style wrestling, and it worked. Now, you compare that to the year they had Snooki teaming up with John Morrison to fight, or with John Morrison and Trish Stratus to fight some other broad and another guy, and she, wasn't as protected. It really, really, really showed how bad. Yeah. Or when you had Lawrence Taylor versus Bam Bam Bigelow. Now, which was funny because Lawrence Taylor actually wrestled a decent match and shouldn't have been the main event. We understood why it was the main event. But that whole notion of it still wasn't a legit match by comparison hurt it a lot, as it should have. Which wound up causing the fans to turn on it, and it just was a bad main event. Jay Leno versus Hulk Hogan, bad main event.
Yeah.
Because, you had Jay Leno put Hulk Hogan in this arm bar that he's holding for 10 minutes. Not really 10 minutes, but so that all these camera people can get a shot of it for all the entertainment sheets, which on the standpoint of drawing interest and attention, it worked, but there you're exposing the business and you're exposing the celebrity in question, and you're sort of throwing them to the wolves, and it just sort of went out the window. And those are moments you do celebrity wrong. But again, when you had Karl Malone teaming with DDP to take on Dennis Rodman and Hulk Hogan, that worked because you had you had one good worker and one good showman in DDP and Hogan who could keep things going. They had 2 guys who were taking the wrestling part seriously in Karl Malone and Dennis Rodman, so that worked. So again, it's 50-50.
Yeah,
there's
like I said,
there's ways to make it work. But yes, but more often than not, if the celebrity coming in sees this more as a promotional deal and not something they want to be a part of or be passionate about, it's never good. Yeah. If it's something they were a fan of, if it's something they liked, wanted to be a part of, it's usually pretty good, if nothing else, at least passable.
Yeah.
So anyway, WrestleMania is coming up, and hopefully we figure out a way to get the machine going on this, because it just feels like another year. And it should feel like more than that. We have some really good matches on deck, so it should really feel bigger than it is. I mean, we have Bray Wyatt going in as champion. The Eater of Pins is champion.
Oh, shit.
Exactly. So we should be more excited than we are. So hopefully in the future they get this thing going right. But I think that's it for this week. I think let's call it early. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's about good.
All right.
Been kind of early.
All right. Well, for Nerdsatnite Gaming, I'm Kid Thunder DJ.
And I'm Fire 47.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
See ya.